My parents kicked me out after I finished building a rental house in their backyard, only to give everything to my sister. So I did something terrible. I'm Maya, and I need to tell you about the day my entire world collapsed. You know how some people say they can feel disaster coming? Well, I should have trusted that instinct. I was 28, working 2 jobs and living paycheck to paycheck. But I had this dream. My parents owned this beautiful property with a huge backyard, and for months they'd been encouraging me to build a guest house there. "It'll be yours forever," my mother would say, her eyes lighting up. "Your own little sanctuary." I believed them. God, how naive I was. For 8 months, I poured everything into that project. Every dollar I'd saved for the past 3 years. $15,000 that was supposed to be my emergency fund. I researched contractors, picked out every fixture, every paint color. I dreamed about the mornings I'd wake up in my own space, finally independent, but still close to family. The construction was grueling. I worked my regular shift at the marketing agency, then spent evenings and weekends on site. My hands were permanently stained with paint and dust. I lost weight from the stress and physical exhaustion, but I didn't care. This was my future taking shape, board by board, brick by brick. When we reached the final week, I was practically vibrating with excitement. The floors were polished, the kitchen cabinets installed, the bathroom tiles gleaming. It was small but perfect. 600 square feet of pure potential. I'd already planned where my bed would go, how I'd arrange my books, where I'd put the little dining table I'd been saving up to buy. The morning of completion, I arrived early with coffee and pastries for the finishing crew. The painter was adding the final coat to the front door, a soft sage green I'd agonized over for weeks. The electrician was installing the last light fixture. Everything was falling into place beautifully. That's when my father appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Something in his tone made my stomach drop, but I forced a smile. "Sure, what's up? Isn't it amazing how it turned out? I can't wait to start moving my stuff in." He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. "That's what I need to discuss with you. Your mother and I have been talking, and we've decided, well, we think it would be better if your sister lived here instead." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward. "What? She's getting married next year, and she and her fiancé need a place to start out. This would be perfect for them. You understand, right? You're older, more established. You can find your own place." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for him to laugh and say he was joking, but his face remained serious, almost apologetic. "But I built this. With my money. My savings. And we're grateful, sweetheart." "Really? But family helps family. And right now, your sister needs help more than you do." That phrase, "family helps family," would echo in my head for weeks afterward. Apparently, it only applied when I was the one doing the helping. I looked around at my dream house, at the walls I'd painted, the fixtures I'd chosen, the future I'd planned. The morning sun was streaming through the windows I'd measured and ordered myself, casting warm light across the hardwood floors I'd supervised the installation of. "When?" I managed to whisper. "Today. We've already talked to your sister. She's excited to move in this weekend." My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe properly. 28 years of being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who always sacrificed for family harmony, and this was my reward. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I might scream, or cry, or say something I'd regret. So I gathered my purse, my water bottle, my little notebook where I'd been planning the final decorating touches. "Maya," my father called as I reached the door. "You do understand, don't you? This is what's best for everyone." I turned back one last time, memorizing every corner of the space I'd never call home. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And I did understand. I understood that I'd been played. I understood that my dreams meant nothing to them. I understood that $15,000 and 8 months of my life had just been handed over to my sister like a birthday present. What they didn't understand was that this was the last time I'd let it happen. I walked out of that guest house and didn't look back. I had no idea then that this moment would change everything. Not just for me, but for all of them. Driving away from my parents' house that morning, memories flooded back like a dam had burst. This wasn't the first time I'd been sacrificed for my sister's benefit. It was just the most expensive. I was 7 when it started, really started. My sister was 3, all chubby cheeks and innocent eyes. She'd broken my favorite doll, the one with real hair that our grandmother had given me for my birthday. When I cried, my parents sat me down for a lecture about being the big sister and setting a good example. "She's little, Maya. She doesn't understand. You need to be patient with her. I learned to be patient. I learned to share everything. My toys, my clothes, my space, my parents' attention. When she colored on my homework, I got in trouble for not watching her carefully enough. When she lost my library book, I had to pay the replacement fee from my allowance. But the car incident? That's when I realized how deep this pattern ran. I was 16 and had been working at the local ice cream shop every weekend and summer for 2 years. Every dollar went into a glass jar in my closet, carefully counted and recounted. I was saving for a used Honda Civic I'd seen at a dealership across town. It wasn't fancy, but it would be mine, and it would mean freedom. 2 weeks before I had enough money saved, my sister crashed her bike into the neighbor's fence. She was 13 then, old enough to know better, but she'd been showing off for some boy from school. The repair bill was $800, exactly what I had in my jar. "Maya, honey, we need to talk," my mother had said, using the same gentle voice my father would use years later about the guest house. "Your sister made a mistake, and we need to help her fix it. You understand, don't you? Family helps family." There was that phrase again. I wondered now if they practiced saying it in the mirror. "But Mom, that's my car money. I've been working for 2 years. And we're so proud of your hard work. But right now, your sister needs help. You can save up again. You're responsible, you'll manage. Always responsible. Always managing. Always understanding." I handed over the money and watched my sister nod solemnly when our parents lectured her about being more careful. She even hugged me and whispered thank you in that sweet voice that had gotten her out of trouble her whole life. But I noticed she never offered to pay me back, and our parents never suggested she should. That car became hers 2 years later when she turned 16. Our parents bought it as a surprise for her birthday. The same model, same year, even the same color I'd wanted. When I pointed out the coincidence, my mother laughed. "Oh, Maya, you noticed. We remembered how much you loved that car. Now your sister gets to enjoy it too. Enjoy what should have been mine." But I was away at college by then, commuting on the bus because I couldn't afford a car anymore. I'd taken out extra student loans instead of using my savings because, well, I didn't have any savings. College was supposed to be my escape, but even from a distance, the pattern continued. Phone calls asking for help with my sister's tuition because she'd spent her scholarship money on clothes and trips. Guilt trips about missing family dinners because I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for my own expenses. Constant comparisons about how naturally talented she was, how easily things came to her. "You've always had to work harder for everything," my father once said, like it was a character flaw instead of evidence of my dedication. After graduation, I stayed in town instead of taking that job offer in Chicago. Why? Because my sister was still in high school, and my parents worried about her future. Someone needed to be the good example, the stable influence, someone responsible. I took the marketing job, found a small apartment, and settled into a routine of family dinners and holiday obligations. I watched my sister coast through her senior year, get into college on a combination of my parents' financial support and my tutoring, and graduate with a degree in communications that she barely used. When she announced her engagement last year, the family celebration was huge. Our parents threw a party, invited everyone, talked endlessly about wedding plans and future grandchildren. When I'd mentioned dating someone seriously a few months earlier, my mother's response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear. Just make sure he's right for you. You can't afford to make mistakes at your age." At my age. I was 28, hardly ancient, but somehow I was already past the point where I deserved excitement about my romantic future. All those memories crystallized in that moment in the guest house. 21 years of being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who sacrificed so her little sister could shine. 21 years of watching my dreams get smaller, while hers got bigger. But this time was different. This time they'd taken something I'd built with my own hands, something that represented my future independence. This time, they'd gone too far. As I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, hands shaking as I held my phone, I realized something important. I was done being understanding. I was done being responsible for everyone else's happiness while mine got pushed aside. I was done being the good daughter who always gave up her dreams for the family favorite. The guest house was finished, and so was I. Let me take you back to how this whole nightmare started, because the betrayal was so much deeper than just taking away my house. They'd planned this. They'd manipulated me from the very beginning. It was last November when my father first brought up the idea. I was over for Sunday dinner, helping my mother with dishes while my sister scrolled through wedding Pinterest boards at the kitchen table. "You know, Maya," my father said, drying a plate with unnecessary focus. Your mother and I have been thinking. That back corner of our property just sits there unused. What if we built something there? I glanced out the window at the space he meant. It was perfect, flat, partially shaded by old oak trees, with natural privacy from the neighbor's fence. I'd actually daydreamed about it before, imagining what it would be like to have a little cottage there. Like a garden shed? I asked. Bigger than that. A guest house, maybe. Something with a full bathroom, small kitchen, a real living space. My mother turned from the sink, her face bright with excitement. We could use it for visitors, or... She paused, looking at me with that warm smile that used to make me feel so loved. Maybe one of our daughters could live there someday. My heart jumped. My lease was up in March, and my landlord had already warned me about a rent increase. The idea of living on my parents' property, in my own space, was intoxicating. That sounds amazing, I said carefully. Are you thinking of hiring contractors? My father shook his head. Too expensive, but you manage that renovation project at your office so well. We thought maybe you could oversee something like this. Over the next week, they brought it up constantly. My mother showed me magazine clippings of tiny homes and guest houses. My father mentioned a contractor friend who could do the foundation work cheaply. They asked my opinion on everything: square footage, layout, materials. Of course, whoever ends up living there would need to contribute to the construction costs, my mother said during one of these conversations. It's only fair. How much are we talking about? I asked. My father pulled out a notebook covered in calculations. We're thinking around $15,000 should cover it. Materials, permits, labor for the big jobs. The person living there could handle the finishing work themselves, painting, fixtures, that sort of thing. $15,000, my entire savings account. But for a place of my own, on property I loved, near family, it seemed reasonable. More than reasonable. It seemed like a dream come true. And whoever contributes that money, my mother added, would have the house for as long as they wanted it. Permanently. Permanently. That word sealed it for me. I said yes that same night. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of planning. I spent every evening researching fixtures and finishes. I created Pinterest boards and spreadsheets. I drove to 3 different tile shops to find the perfect bathroom flooring. My parents were so encouraging, so excited about my ideas. You have such good taste, my mother would say as I showed her cabinet samples. This is going to be absolutely beautiful. I took vacation days to meet with contractors and delivery trucks. I learned about electrical codes and plumbing permits. I negotiated with suppliers and managed timelines. My parents praised my organizational skills constantly. We're so lucky to have you handling this, my father said more than once. We never could have managed all these details. When construction began in March, I was there every morning before work and every evening after. I brought coffee for the crew, checked on progress, solved problems as they arose. It was exhausting, but I'd never been happier. This was mine. I was building my future, literally from the ground up. The house took shape exactly as I'd envisioned it. 600 square feet of perfection. An open-plan living area that flowed into a compact but efficient kitchen, a bedroom just big enough for a queen bed and dresser, and a bathroom with a gorgeous subway tile shower I'd splurged on. I chose everything personally. The soft gray paint for the walls, the brushed gold fixtures that caught the morning light, the farmhouse sink I'd fallen in love with at the home improvement store, the hardwood floors that cost more than I'd budgeted for but would last forever. Every night I'd walk through the space and imagine my life there. I'd make coffee in that kitchen and drink it on the small front porch. I'd read books in the living room on the cozy sofa I was planning to buy. I'd invite friends over for dinner and cook in my own space for the first time in my adult life. My sister showed mild interest throughout the process, occasionally stopping by to see the progress. It's cute, she'd say, but she was usually more focused on her wedding planning. She was getting married in October and moving in with her fiancé afterward, so I assumed she'd never even considered the guest house for herself. My parents, though, they were invested. They asked about every detail, complimented every choice I made. They brought lunch for the workers and bragged to neighbors about their daughter's project management skills. Maya designed the whole thing herself. I heard my mother telling our neighbor one afternoon, "She has such vision." I glowed under their praise. After years of feeling like the less important daughter, this project made me feel valued, appreciated, central to the family's future plans. The irony is devastating now. They weren't praising my vision. They were using my vision. They weren't proud of my skills. They were exploiting my skills. Every compliment, every word of encouragement, Every moment of seeming respect was just manipulation to get me to build them a house for free. When the final inspection passed and the certificate of occupancy came through, I felt like I could fly. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I had a home, a real home, that was mine permanently. That night, I called my best friend and told her I'd finally be able to host her when she visited from Portland. I researched internet providers and scheduled installation. I started a shopping list for furniture and kitchen supplies. I had no idea that my parents were simultaneously making their own plans that didn't include me at all. After leaving my parents' house that morning, I did something that surprised even me. Absolutely nothing. I didn't call them. I didn't text angry messages. I didn't show up demanding explanations or pleading for reconsideration. I went completely silent, and that silence was strategic in ways they couldn't possibly understand yet. You see, there was something I knew that they didn't, something that would make their betrayal backfire in ways they never saw coming. During the final week of construction, when we were down to the last few finishing touches, my father had made a decision that I'd strongly advised against. We needed someone to install the final plumbing connections, seal some gaps in the foundation, and complete the electrical work for the outdoor lighting. I'd recommended my usual contractor, reliable, licensed, expensive. My father had other ideas. I found someone cheaper, he'd announced, waving a business card. This guy can do it for half the price. I'd looked at the card skeptically. No company name, just a handwritten phone number and construction services in faded print. Dad, we're so close to finishing. This isn't the time to cut corners. Let me call my regular guy. Maya, sweetie, you've already spent so much money. Let me handle this last bit, save you some cash. I should have insisted. I should have put my foot down. But I was tired. Emotionally drained from months of managing every detail, and he seemed so confident. Against my better judgment, I let him hire the cheap contractor. The work was completed while I was at my day job, unable to supervise. When I came by that evening, everything looked fine on the surface. The cheap contractor was long gone, paid in cash by my father, no receipt, no warranty, no way to contact him again. But I noticed things. Small things that made my stomach twist with worry. The caulking around the bathroom fixtures looked sloppy. The outdoor electrical connection seemed loose. There was a strange chemical smell near the foundation that hadn't been there before. The water pressure in the kitchen sink was weaker than it should have been. I mentioned my concerns to my father, but he brushed them off. You're overthinking it, Maya. Everything's fine. The guy did good work. I let it go because the house was essentially finished, and I was so close to moving in. I figured any minor issues could be addressed later. Now, sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, cutting all contact with my family, I realized those weren't minor issues at all. They were time bombs, and the timer was already ticking. I didn't tell my parents what I suspected. I didn't warn them about the substandard work. I didn't offer to fix the problems I'd noticed. For the first time in my adult life, I decided that their problems were not my responsibility to solve. Instead, I went home to my apartment, packed up my work clothes, and went about my normal routine. I showed up to my job at the marketing agency, completed my projects, attended my meetings. Colleagues asked about the house. They'd been following my updates for months, and I simply said the timeline had changed. My phone buzzed constantly for the first 2 days. Texts from my mother asking if I was okay, calls from my father wanting to talk through the situation. Messages from my sister asking when I'd be moving my stuff out of my apartment so she could start decorating the guest house. I ignored them all. By day 3, the messages had shifted from concerned to frustrated. Maya, this silent treatment is childish. Call me back. Dad, I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We're family. Mom, whatever your issue is, don't take it out on me. I didn't do anything wrong. My sister. I deleted every message without responding. The silence was harder than I'd expected. 28 years of being the good daughter, the responsible one who always called back, always showed up, always fixed problems. Breaking that pattern felt like swimming upstream against my own nature. But I had a plan. It wasn't fully formed yet, but it was growing stronger each day. On day 5, I allowed myself one small indulgence. I drove past the house, not to stop or confront anyone, just to see. My sister's car was in the driveway along with my parents. They were probably inside making plans for her move-in, discussing how to arrange furniture in the space I'd designed, choosing paint colors to cover the walls I'd carefully selected. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Because while they were busy celebrating their victory, they had no idea what was coming. They thought they'd gotten away with the perfect crime. manipulating me into building them a house, then giving it to the golden child while casting me aside. What they didn't realize was that I'd built that house from the foundation up. I knew every pipe, every wire, every corner where corners had been cut. I knew exactly what problems were brewing beneath the surface, and I knew they'd surface soon. I also knew something else that would become important later. Legally, morally, and practically, I had no obligation to fix problems I hadn't created. The work done after I left the project wasn't my responsibility. For the first time in my life, I was going to let my family face the consequences of their choices without rushing in to save them. The silence would end when they needed something from me. And when that happened, they'd discover that the daughter they'd taken for granted had learned some very important lessons about family, loyalty, and self-respect. The first call came exactly 1 week after I'd walked out of the guest house. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was having coffee before work when my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, my mother called. Then my sister. Then my father again. I was curious enough to listen to the voicemails during my lunch break. "Maya, honey, we need to talk. There's a small issue with the guest house that we could use your help with. Call me back, please." My father's voice was strained, lacking his usual confidence. The next message was from my mother. "Maya, I don't understand why you won't answer our calls. We're family, and families work through problems together. Your sister found some water damage in the bathroom, and we need your advice about who to call." Water damage. I'd been expecting that. My sister's voicemail was predictably dramatic. "Maya, I don't know what your problem is, but there are serious issues with this house and you need to fix them. The bathroom floor is wet, there's a weird smell, and the lights keep flickering. I can't move in like this." I deleted all the messages and went back to work. The calls intensified over the next few days. My father started leaving increasingly detailed descriptions of the problems they were discovering. The bathroom had a persistent leak that was warping the floorboards. The kitchen sink was backing up. The electrical outlets in the bedroom weren't working properly. There was a musty odor throughout the house that seemed to be getting worse. "Maya, I know you're upset with us, but this is serious. We need your expertise. You know this house better than anyone." That last part was true. I did know the house better than anyone. I knew exactly what was happening and why. The cheap contractor my father had insisted on hiring had done shoddy work on the final connections. The plumbing wasn't properly sealed, which explained the bathroom leak and kitchen backup. The electrical work wasn't up to code, which explained the flickering and dead outlets. And that chemical smell I'd noticed? That was likely from improper foundation sealing, which could lead to moisture problems and potential mold growth. All fixable problems. All expensive problems. All problems that would require tearing apart some of the beautiful finishes I'd so carefully selected and installed, but not my problems. On Friday of that first week, my mother tried a different approach. She showed up at my office. "Maya, we need to talk," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "I'm at work, Mom. This will just take a minute. The guest house has some problems, and we need your help fixing them." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. She looked tired, stressed in a way I wasn't used to seeing. "Good. What kind of problems?" "Well, there's some water damage in the bathroom, and electrical issues, and a smell that won't go away. Your sister can't move in until they're resolved." "That's unfortunate," I said calmly. She blinked, clearly expecting more response. "Maya, you supervise the construction. You must know what's causing these problems." "I supervised construction until it was essentially complete. Any problems that developed after that aren't my responsibility. But you know the house better than anyone. You could at least recommend someone to fix the issues?" I turned back to my computer screen. "I'm sure you can find qualified contractors. There are plenty of them listed online." "Maya?" Her voice took on that pleading tone I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she needed me to be the responsible one. "We're family. Family helps family." I looked up at her then, and I made sure my expression was perfectly calm. "You're absolutely right, Mom. Family does help family. It's interesting how that only seems to apply when you need something from me. Though," she flushed. "That's not fair. We've always been there for you. Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I've been there for you. I've been there for my sister. I've been understanding and helpful and responsible for 28 years. But when I needed something, when I needed the house I built with my own money and labor to actually be mine like you promised, where was the family support then?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "I have work to do. I'm sure you'll figure out the house situation." She sat there for another moment, clearly hoping I'd change my mind. When I didn't, she gathered her purse and left without another word. That weekend, The calls became more frequent and more desperate. My father admitted they'd gotten quotes from 3 different contractors, and the repairs would cost at least $5,000. They'd also discovered that some of the work would require permits, which meant inspections, which might reveal other problems. Maya, please. We made a mistake about the living situation. We can work something out. But right now, we need your help with the immediate problems. Too little. Too late. By Sunday evening, my sister had left her 4th voicemail of the day. Maya, this is ridiculous. I'm supposed to be planning my wedding, not dealing with construction disasters. You built this house, you need to take responsibility for fixing it. The irony was almost funny. Take responsibility for fixing it? I'd taken responsibility for building it. I'd taken responsibility for managing every detail, solving every problem, making every decision, right up until the moment they decided it wasn't mine anymore. Now that there were new problems to solve, suddenly they remembered how valuable my skills were. Suddenly they needed the responsible daughter who always fixed everything. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. That daughter had been dismissed, discarded, betrayed. The woman I was becoming had learned an important lesson about the difference between being helpful and being used. The calls kept coming, but I kept ignoring them. Each voicemail was more desperate than the last, each text more pleading. They needed me now. But for the first time in my adult life, their needs weren't automatically my problem to solve. By the 2nd week, when it became clear I wouldn't be coming to their rescue, my parents shifted tactics. If they couldn't get me to help willingly, they'd try to shame me into it. The first sign was a phone call from my aunt on my father's side. She lived 3 states away, and we rarely spoke outside of holidays and birthdays, so her call was immediately suspicious. Maya, honey, I just wanted to check on you. Your father mentioned you've been having some family difficulties. I could hear the careful phrasing, the way she was fishing for information without admitting what she'd been told. I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Well, good. It's just that he seemed concerned about you. Said you'd been struggling with some emotional issues lately, and that you'd walked away from helping with some construction project. There it was. The family narrative was already being rewritten. I wasn't the daughter who'd been betrayed and cast aside. I was the unstable one having an emotional breakdown, abandoning family responsibilities. I'm not struggling with anything, I said calmly. I'm just no longer available to solve problems I didn't create. Oh, she paused, clearly not expecting that response. Well, I'm sure whatever happened, you can work it out. Family is so important. After she hung up, I realized this was just the beginning. My parents were launching a full-scale campaign to turn the extended family against me, painting me as the unreasonable daughter who'd abandoned them in their time of need. The evidence piled up over the next few days. My cousin sent a text asking if I was okay because she'd heard I was going through a difficult time. My uncle mentioned that he'd heard about some family drama when I ran into him at the grocery store. My grandmother called to check on my mental health because my mother had been so worried about me. The story they were telling became clearer with each interaction. According to my parents' version of events, I had volunteered to help with a construction project, but then abandoned it before completion, leaving them with a damaged house and no way to fix it. They painted themselves as the victims of my irresponsible behavior, concerned parents trying to help their troubled daughter while dealing with the consequences of my poor decisions. They were very careful about how they told it. They never outright lied. That would have been too easy to disprove. Instead, they twisted the truth, emphasized certain facts while omitting others, and implied things without directly stating them. Yes, I had been involved in a construction project. Yes, there were problems with the house. Yes, I had stopped communicating with them. But they left out tiny details like the fact that I'd funded the entire project, managed every aspect of construction, and been betrayed at the last minute. The most insidious part was how they framed my silence. Instead of acknowledging that they'd given away something that belonged to me, they presented my lack of response as evidence of instability. Maya's having some kind of breakdown. She won't return our calls. We're so worried about her. It was masterfully manipulative, and it was working. I started getting concerned messages from family members I hadn't heard from in months. Everyone was so worried about me. Everyone wanted to help me work things out with my parents. Everyone thought I should be more understanding, more forgiving, more willing to compromise. Family is forever, my grandmother said during one of her check-in calls. Whatever happened, you'll regret letting pride come between you and your parents. Pride. As if standing up for myself was a character flaw. The worst part was discovering how thoroughly my parents had poisoned the well. At a work happy hour, a colleague mentioned that her husband had run into my father at the hardware store. According to the story he'd told, I'd started a construction project I couldn't afford, then had some kind of nervous breakdown and disappeared, leaving them to deal with the mess. He seemed really concerned about you, she said with genuine sympathy. Are you getting the help you need? The help I need. As if I was the one with problems. I realized then how carefully they'd crafted their narrative. They weren't just trying to get me to fix the house. They were systematically destroying my reputation to ensure that when people heard my side of the story, they'd already been primed to dismiss it as the ravings of an unstable person. It was brilliant, really. Evil, but brilliant. 3 weeks into my silence, cracks began appearing in my parents' carefully constructed narrative. The truth, as it turns out, is harder to contain than lies. The first leak came from an unexpected source. The mailman. I was checking my mail one evening when my neighbor approached me. We'd lived next to each other for 2 years and had a friendly but distant relationship, the kind where you wave and make small talk about weather. Hey, Maya, he said, looking uncomfortable. I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay with your parents' house project? My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Well, the mailman mentioned that he's been delivering a lot of certified letters to their address lately. Official-looking stuff. And my wife saw what looked like a city inspector over there yesterday. Certified letters. City inspectors. The problems were worse than I'd thought. I wouldn't know, I said honestly. I'm not involved with that project anymore. He nodded, but I could see the questions in his eyes. If I wasn't involved, who was handling the issues? And why were there so many official-looking problems? The second leak came from my hairdresser, of all people. She'd been cutting my family's hair for 15 years and knew all of us well. Your poor parents, she said while trimming my ends. Your mother was in here last week and she looked exhausted. All those problems with the house addition they're dealing with. Addition? The guest house in their backyard. She said there were mold problems now. And the city might make them tear the whole thing down if they can't fix the permit issues. Mold problems. Permit issues. My suspicions about the foundation work were proving correct, and it was worse than I'd expected. That's too bad, I said carefully. She mentioned you'd been so helpful with the initial construction, but that you'd had to step back because of work commitments. She seemed really stressed about handling it all without you. Interesting. When talking to the hairdresser, I was suddenly the helpful daughter who'd stepped back due to work, not the unstable daughter having a breakdown. The third leak was the most significant. My sister's friends. I ran into one of them at the coffee shop where I'd spent that first morning after leaving the guest house. She recognized me and came over, her face full of sympathy. Maya, how are you holding up with all the house drama? I'm fine, I said, genuinely curious about what she'd heard. Your sister is so frustrated. She keeps posting about it in our group chat. The mold situation sounds terrible. And now she's saying the whole foundation might need to be redone? Foundation work. That would be a complete disaster, requiring the house to be essentially rebuilt from scratch. It sounds complicated, I agreed. She's furious about the wedding timeline too. She was supposed to move in next month, but now she's saying it might be months before it's livable. Her fiancé is starting to look at apartments instead. This was news to me. My sister's wedding was in October, just 4 months away. If she couldn't move into the guest house, she'd need to find alternative housing, which would mean additional expenses during an already costly time. She keeps saying someone needs to take responsibility for the mess, but it's not clear who that someone is supposed to be. I mean, who actually built the house? There was the question that would unravel everything. Who built the house? Who managed the construction? Who chose the contractors and supervised the work? That's a good question, I said. Over the next few days, more details emerged from various sources. The problems weren't just cosmetic anymore, they were structural and potentially hazardous. The improper foundation sealing had indeed led to moisture issues, which had created ideal conditions for mold growth. The electrical work was so substandard that it posed a fire hazard. The plumbing problems had worsened, causing water damage that was spreading beyond the bathroom. But the most interesting development was the permit situation. Apparently, the final work done by my father's cheap contractor had been completed without proper permits or inspections. When my parents had finally called in legitimate contractors to assess the damage, those contractors had been required to report the unpermitted work to the city. Now my parents were facing not just repair costs, but fines, mandatory inspections, and the possibility of having to bring everything up to current codes, which could mean gutting and rebuilding significant portions of the house. The financial implications were staggering. What had started as a few $1,000s in repair costs was now looking like it might require tens of thousands to resolve properly. And through it all, family members kept asking the same questions. Who was responsible for the construction? Who had managed the project? Who knew enough about the house to guide the repairs? The answers to those questions led back to me, which made my continued absence increasingly difficult for my parents to explain. How could they claim I was having a breakdown when I was clearly the only one with the expertise to solve their problems? How could they paint me as irresponsible when the mess had been created by work done after I left the project? Slowly, the real story began to emerge in family conversations. I wasn't the unstable daughter who'd abandoned a project. I was the competent daughter who'd built something beautiful, only to have it taken away from me at the last minute. The narrative was shifting, and my parents could feel it. The calls became more frequent, the voicemails more desperate, the attempts to contact me more creative, but I remained silent. Not because I was having a breakdown, and not because I was being stubborn. I remained silent because I was learning something important about power dynamics and family manipulation. For the first time in my life, I had something they needed more than I needed their approval, and I was finally ready to use that leverage. 4 weeks after I'd walked out of the guest house, my sister finally broke. I was at home on a Saturday morning, enjoying the first peaceful weekend I'd had in months, when my phone rang with her number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Maya!" Her voice was shrill with frustration and barely contained panic. "Finally! Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Don't give me that. This is serious. The house is uninhabitable. There's mold growing in the walls. The bathroom floor is rotting, and the city inspector says the electrical work is dangerous. We might have to tear the whole thing down." "That sounds expensive." "Expensive?" Her voice cracked. "Maya, this is a disaster. My wedding is in 3 months, and I have nowhere to live. The contractors are saying it could take 6 months and $40,000 to fix everything properly." $40,000. The house I'd built for $15,000 would now cost nearly 3 times that amount to repair. The irony was almost poetic. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry. Sorry that my parents' greed and my sister's entitlement had led to this mess. "You're sorry?" She was screaming now. "Maya, you built this house. You know every pipe, every wire, every corner that was cut. You have to help us." "Actually, I didn't cut any corners. I hired qualified contractors, used quality materials, and followed all proper procedures. The problems you're describing happened after I left the project. But you supervised everything. You know who to call, how to fix it, what needs to be done. I supervised construction until it was essentially complete. What happened after that? The work your father hired someone to do? That's not my responsibility." There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more desperate. "Maya, please. I know what happened with the living situation was complicated, but this is bigger than that now. We need your help." "Complicated?" I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. "Is that what we're calling it now? Complicated? Look, maybe Mom and Dad made a mistake about who should live there. Maybe we can work something out, but right now we need to focus on fixing the immediate problems." "Here's the thing," I said, settling back in my chair. "I'm not available to fix problems I didn't create. I built a beautiful, functional house using quality contractors and proper procedures. Someone else made different choices about the final work, and now you're dealing with the consequences of those choices." "But Maya, we're family." "Yes, we are. And you know what families do? They keep their promises to each other. They don't manipulate each other into funding projects just to give them away at the last minute. They don't paint each other as unstable when they refuse to clean up messes they didn't make." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? You don't know about the calls to our relatives? The story about how I had some kind of breakdown and abandoned a construction project? The narrative about poor Mom and Dad dealing with their troubled daughter's irresponsible behavior?" Another silence. "Maya, I might have mentioned to some people that you were upset, but you all decided it was easier to make me the villain than to admit you'd betrayed me. We didn't betray you. We thought it would work better if I lived there. You're older, more established, you have more options. I had $15,000 in savings and 8 months of my life invested in that house. I had plans, dreams, a future mapped out in that space. What I didn't have was the luxury of being the family favorite who gets handed everything she wants." She started crying then. Big, dramatic sobs that would have worked on me a month ago. "Maya, please. I don't know what to do. My fiancé is talking about postponing the wedding. Mom and Dad are fighting constantly about money. The contractors are saying the damage might spread to the main house if we don't act soon. I need your help." "You need my expertise," I corrected. The same expertise you all dismissed when you decided I wasn't important enough to keep my own house. That's not... We never said you weren't important. Actions speak louder than words. And your actions told me exactly how important I was to this family. So what? You're just going to let everything fall apart? You're going to punish all of us because your feelings got hurt? My feelings got hurt? I stood up, anger finally breaking through my calm facade. My sister, I didn't get my feelings hurt. I got robbed. I got manipulated. I got used and discarded like a contractor whose services were no longer needed. But we're family, she repeated desperately. Then act like it. Take responsibility for the choices you all made. Deal with the consequences like adults instead of expecting me to swoop in and fix everything like I always have. Maya, I have to go. I hope you figure out your housing situation. I hung up and turned off my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, from liberation. For the first time in 28 years, I'd refused to be the family fixer. I'd refused to prioritize their crisis over my own dignity. It felt terrifying and empowering at the same time. They needed me desperately now. But I was finally learning that being needed and being valued are two completely different things. And I was done settling for one when I deserved both. 6 weeks after walking away from the guest house, I was finally finding my rhythm in this new version of myself. The daughter who said no, who set boundaries, who refused to be taken for granted. My days were peaceful, my stress levels had plummeted, and for the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, rather than what my family needed. Then my mother called with news that changed everything. Maya, honey, I know you don't want to talk to us, but I wanted to let you know that your father and I are going to visit his sister in Arizona. She's been having health problems, and we need to be there for a couple of weeks. I almost laughed at the irony. They needed to be there for family, but hadn't been there for me when I needed them. I hope she's okay, I said neutrally. We're flying out next Friday. Your sister will be staying at her fiancé's place while we're gone. She's afraid to be alone in the main house with all the construction issues happening in the backyard. Something about the way she said it made my pulse quicken. So the house will be empty? Well, yes. But Maya, I'm hoping when we get back, we can all sit down and work this out. The situation has gotten so complicated, and we need your expertise to... I stopped listening. The house would be empty for 2 weeks. My sister would be staying with her fiancé. No one would be around to witness whatever happened on that property. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Really smiled. I hope you have a safe trip, I said, cutting off her plea for help. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment and let an idea take shape. A wild, audacious, probably insane idea that made my heart race with possibility. The guest house was a disaster now. Uninhabitable, structurally compromised, a financial burden that was threatening to spread damage to the main house. The city had issued citations. The contractors were talking about 6 months of work and $40,000 in repairs. My sister couldn't live there, couldn't even safely visit there. But it was still the house I'd built. Every stud, every beam, every carefully chosen fixture. I'd selected it all, supervised its installation, watched it take shape from nothing into something beautiful. Before the cheap contractor had ruined it, it had been perfect. It had also been mine. Legally, morally, in every way that mattered except the one that counted. I'd funded it, designed it, built it. The only reason it wasn't officially mine was because I'd trusted my parents' promise that it would be mine forever. What if I took back what was rightfully mine? Not the building. That was compromised beyond repair now. But the materials, the fixtures, the elements I'd chosen and paid for? What if I reclaimed them in the most direct way possible? I spent the weekend researching demolition companies, equipment rental services, waste management options. I told myself I was just exploring possibilities, just satisfying curiosity. But deep down, I knew I was planning something that would either be the most empowering moment of my life or the most destructive decision I'd ever made. The more I thought about it, the more logical it seemed. The house was essentially condemned. Everyone agreed it would need to be gutted and rebuilt anyway. The mold and water damage had made the structure unsafe. The foundation issues meant everything would have to be torn down to the studs at minimum. I would just be accelerating the inevitable. By Wednesday, I'd called 3 different demolition companies for quotes. I told them I needed a small structure demolished and removed quickly while my neighbors were out of town. 2 of them were booked for months. But the third, a small operation run by a man who'd been in business for 20 years, could do it the following week. It's just a guest house, I explained. About 600 square feet. Needs to come down due to structural issues. No problem, he said. One-day job. We can have it knocked down and hauled away in 8 hours, easy. Site will be clean as a whistle when we're done. The cost was reasonable. Less than what my parents would spend on a single month of attempted repairs. I had enough in my checking account to cover it without touching my remaining savings. When can you do it? I asked. Next Tuesday work for you? Weather's supposed to be clear, and we're between bigger jobs. Tuesday. 5 days after my parents left for Arizona. Perfect timing. That sounds ideal, I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment and really considered what I was planning. This wasn't a small act of rebellion or a symbolic gesture. This was nuclear. This was final. This was the kind of thing that would burn every bridge between me and my family forever. But as I thought about the past 6 weeks, the manipulation, the lies, the smear campaign, the complete lack of accountability or apology, I realized something important. Those bridges were already burned. They'd been burned the moment my parents decided to betray me after I'd given them everything I had. I was just making the destruction visible. On Thursday evening, I drove past my parents' house one last time before they left for their trip. The guest house stood in the backyard like a monument to broken promises. Its windows dark, yellow caution tape still stretched across the front door from the latest inspection. It had been beautiful once. I'd made it beautiful. I'd poured my dreams and my savings and my future into every corner of that space. Now it was time to take it all back. I pulled out my phone and confirmed the appointment with the demolition company. Tuesday at 8 a.m., I said. I'll be there to supervise. Monday night, I barely slept. My mind raced between excitement, terror, and a strange sense of righteous calm that I'd never experienced before. By 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, I was dressed and ready, standing in my kitchen with coffee and toast I couldn't eat. This was really happening. At 7:30, I drove to my parents' neighborhood and parked around the corner waiting. At exactly 8 a.m., a large truck rumbled down their street, followed by a smaller vehicle carrying what looked like a portable excavator. My demolition crew had arrived. I walked up to meet them as they parked in front of the house. The owner, a weathered man in his 50s named Rick, climbed out of the truck and extended his hand. You must be Maya. Ready to get this thing down? Absolutely, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Rick and his 2-person crew walked around the guest house, assessing the job. They'd done this hundreds of times. To them, it was just another day at work. They didn't know they were demolishing 8 months of my life, $15,000 of my dreams, and the last remnants of my relationship with my family. Shouldn't take more than 4 hours, Rick said, pulling on work gloves. We'll start with the interior. Pull out anything salvageable first, then knock down the structure and load everything into the dumpster truck. Site'll be clean and level when we're done. What about the utilities? I asked. Already checked, water and electric were shut off last week according to the city records. Gas line was never connected. We're good to go. Perfect. Even the utilities had been disconnected due to the safety issues. There would be no complications, no last-minute problems. The first neighbors started emerging from their houses around 8:30, drawn by the noise of equipment being unloaded. I recognized several of them from my months of construction supervision. They waved and called out greetings. Morning, Maya. Another renovation project? Something like that, I called back. Your parents sure keep you busy with these improvements. I smiled and waved, not correcting their assumptions. To everyone watching, this looked like exactly what it appeared to be. A normal construction project, supervised by the same competent young woman who'd managed the original building process. The crew worked with impressive efficiency. They started by removing salvageable fixtures, the kitchen cabinets I'd chosen, the bathroom vanity I'd agonized over, the light fixtures I'd installed myself. Everything was carefully loaded into the truck. You want these saved for the rebuild? Rick asked, gesturing to a pile of hardware. No, I said firmly. Everything goes. By 10 a.m., they'd stripped the interior down to the studs, revealing the extent of the damage that had developed over the past month. The water damage was worse than I'd imagined. Black mold spread across multiple walls, and the floor joists were visibly warped. The electrical work was clearly substandard, with junction boxes that weren't up to code and wiring that looked dangerous. Good thing you're tearing this down, one of the crew members commented. This place was a disaster waiting to happen. That's what I thought too, I agreed. The actual demolition began around 11 a.m. Watching the excavator tear into the walls I'd painted, seeing the roof I'd chosen come crashing down, should have been devastating. Instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Each crashing beam was a piece of betrayal falling away. Each wall that came down was a broken promise being removed. Each load of debris that went into the truck was part of my old life, the life where I accepted less than I deserved, being hauled away forever. The neighbors continued to stop by throughout the morning. Most assumed my parents had decided to start over after the construction problems, and they were sympathetic about the expense and hassle. "These things happen," one elderly woman said, shaking her head. "Better to tear it down and do it right than to keep throwing good money after bad." "That's exactly what we decided," I agreed. By noon, the guest house was completely gone. Where there had been a building that morning, there was now just clean, level ground. The crew worked for another hour, removing every piece of debris, every nail, every fragment of the structure. "All done," Rick announced, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You wouldn't even know there was ever anything here." He was right. The space looked exactly as it had before construction began 8 months ago. Just an empty corner of my parents' backyard, shaded by oak trees, ready for whatever came next. I paid Rick in cash, thanked his crew, and watched them drive away with everything that remained of my guest house loaded in their truck. Then I stood alone in my parents' backyard, in the spot where my dreams had been built and destroyed, and finally, definitively, reclaimed. It was 1 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. My parents wouldn't return from Arizona for 10 more days. My sister wouldn't discover what had happened until they got back, because she was avoiding the property entirely due to the construction issues. For 10 days, I would be the only person in the world who knew that the guest house, the source of so much conflict, expense, and family drama, no longer existed. The thought made me giddy with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I walked back to my car, got in, and drove home to my apartment. I made lunch, did some laundry, and spent the afternoon reading a book as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. I'd taken back my power in the most complete way possible. I'd solved all their problems. The mold, the structural damage, the permit issues, the financial burden, in a single morning. They'd wanted me to fix the house? Well, I'd fixed it permanently. The next 10 days were the most peaceful of my adult life. I went to work, had dinners with friends, caught up on sleep, and enjoyed a level of mental calm I hadn't experienced in years. Every time I thought about what I'd done, I felt a surge of satisfaction so pure it was almost intoxicating. I knew the reckoning was coming, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. My parents returned from Arizona on a Thursday evening. I knew this because my mother had texted me their flight information days earlier, still hoping I'd offer to pick them up from the airport. I didn't respond to that text, just as I hadn't responded to any of their messages over the past 2 months. Friday morning passed quietly. I figured they'd be dealing with jet lag, unpacking, catching up on mail and messages. The discovery would come soon enough. The call came at 2:47 p.m. My father's name appeared on my phone screen, and for the first time in 10 weeks, I answered. "Hello, Dad." The sound that came through the phone was barely human, a strangled, gasping noise that might have been my name. "Maya?" His voice cracked on the syllables. "Maya, where? What? The house? What about the house? It's gone." The words exploded out of him. "The guest house is gone. There's nothing there. It's just empty ground." "Oh," I said calmly. "Yes, I had it demolished." Silence. Complete. Absolute silence that stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. "You... what?" "I had it demolished. Last Tuesday. The demolition crew did an excellent job. Cleaned up everything, left the site perfectly level. You can't have... Maya, that's impossible. You can't just demolish someone else's property." "Someone else's property?" I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Whose property was it, Dad?" It was on our land. Built with whose money? Designed by whom? Supervised by whom? Who chose every material, every fixture, every detail of that house? "But you can't. This is... Maya, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done. I solved all your problems. No more mold issues, no more structural damage, no more permit violations, no more contractor bills. You're welcome." I could hear him struggling to breathe, struggling to process what I was telling him. "Maya, please tell me this is some kind of joke. Please tell me you didn't actually... Would you like me to send you photos of the clean site?" The demolition crew documented everything thoroughly. The sound he made then was somewhere between a sob and a scream. "Maya, that house was worth... Even with the problems, it was still... The materials alone were worth $15,000 when I paid for them. I simply reclaimed my investment. But the house, my sister's health, the stress of dealing with all those problems, you were supposed to help us. I did help you. I ended your problems permanently. I could hear my mother crying in the background, and my sister's voice rising in what sounded like hysteria. Maya. My father's voice was pleading now, broken in a way I'd never heard before. We can work this out. We can rebuild. We can make this right. With what money, Dad? You told me last month that the repairs alone would cost $40,000. How much do you think it'll cost to rebuild from scratch? We'll figure something out. We'll get loans. You'll figure it out, I agreed. Without me. Maya, please. We're family. Family forgives. Family works through problems together. You're absolutely right, I said. Family should work through problems together. Family should keep promises to each other. Family should support each other instead of manipulating and betraying each other. I'm glad we agree on what family should do. We made mistakes, he said desperately. We can admit that now. We handled the living situation badly. But Maya, what you've done? This is what, Dad? Decisive? Effective? Final? This is destroying our family. No, I said quietly. You destroyed our family 2 months ago when you decided my dreams didn't matter as much as my sister's convenience. I just made the destruction visible. I could hear all three of them crying now. My parents, my sister, maybe her fiancé too. The sound should have broken my heart. A month ago, it would have sent me rushing over there to fix everything, to apologize, to make it all better. But I felt nothing except a deep, settled calm. Maya, my mother had taken the phone now, her voice thick with tears. Baby, please. We know we hurt you, but this is too much. This is too far. Is it, Mom? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels exactly right. For the first time in my adult life, the consequences for family decisions are being borne by the people who made those decisions, not by me. But we're ruined. The money we spent on inspections and contractors, and now there's nothing to show for it. Your sister's wedding, our savings, those sound like problems you'll need to solve. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're very creative when you need to be. I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. For the first time in 2 months, I felt completely free. The guest house was gone. My family's financial problems were no longer my responsibility to solve, and I no longer had to carry the weight of being the daughter who always sacrificed for everyone else's benefit. I'd burned every bridge, scorched every relationship, nuked every possibility of reconciliation, and I had never felt more at peace in my entire life. That was 8 months ago, and I'm writing this from my new apartment across town. A beautiful one-bedroom with hardwood floors and a kitchen island where I eat breakfast every morning while watching the sunrise through my own windows. Let me tell you what happened to everyone because I know you're wondering. My parents never recovered financially from the guest house disaster. Between the money they'd already spent on inspections and contractors, plus the loans they'd taken out expecting to recoup costs through my sister's rent payments, they'd stretched themselves beyond their means. They ended up selling their house 6 months later and moving to a small condo across town. The irony? They sold to a young couple who loved the large backyard and specifically mentioned their plans to build a guest house in that empty corner spot. I heard about this from my hairdresser, who heard it from my mother during what was apparently a very tearful appointment. My sister's wedding did happen, though scaled way back from the elaborate event she'd originally planned. Her fiancé, showing more sense than anyone had given him credit for, insisted they find their own apartment and start their marriage without the drama of extended family housing arrangements. They're still together, living in a modest place across town, and from what I hear through mutual acquaintances, they're actually happier without the constant family interference. She never got over the shock of what I did, though. According to our cousin, she still brings up the demolition at family gatherings, still can't understand how I destroyed something so beautiful out of spite. She doesn't understand that I didn't destroy something beautiful. I reclaimed something that was mine and ended something that had become toxic. My parents tried to pursue legal action against me initially. They consulted with 3 different lawyers, all of whom told them the same thing. I'd funded the construction, supervised the work, and the demolition occurred on a structure that was already condemned by the city due to safety violations. There was no case. The extended family drama played out exactly as you'd expect. Some relatives took my parents' side, viewing me as the vengeful daughter who went too far. Others, once they learned the full story, quietly reached out to express support for my decision. My grandmother, surprisingly, was in the second group. Sometimes, she told me during a phone call that came 3 months after the demolition, you have to make choices that other people don't understand. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, even though it was painful. The professional consequences were minimal. My coworkers had followed the saga from the beginning and understood that I'd been manipulated and betrayed. If anything, my reputation at work improved. Apparently, taking decisive action to reclaim what was mine demonstrated leadership qualities my boss found impressive. I got promoted 4 months later. The personal consequences were more complex. Yes, I lost my immediate family relationships, but I gained something more valuable: self-respect. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. I wasn't the family fixer, the responsible one, the daughter who always sacrificed for everyone else's benefit. I was just Maya, living my own life, making my own choices, keeping my own counsel. I started dating again, really dating, not just accepting whatever scraps of attention came my way between family crises. I met someone wonderful 6 months ago, a man who actually appreciates my competence instead of exploiting it, who supports my decisions instead of expecting me to support everyone else's. When I told him the story of the guest house, his response was immediate. Good for you. They had it coming. That's when I knew I'd found someone worth keeping. I still think about that Tuesday morning sometimes, about the sound of the demolition equipment and the sight of my dreams being loaded into a truck. But it doesn't make me sad anymore. It makes me proud. I learned something important that day. There's a difference between being loving and being used, between being family-oriented and being exploited, between being understanding and being a doormat. The $15,000 I lost in that demolition was the best money I ever spent. It bought me something priceless: the knowledge that I'm worth more than being everyone else's solution to their problems. Do I regret it? Sometimes people ask me that, usually with a mix of horror and fascination at what I did. The answer is complicated. I regret that it came to that point. I regret that my family's behavior was so toxic that nuclear action felt like the only option. I regret the years I wasted being the good daughter who always gave up her dreams for everyone else's convenience. But do I regret taking back my power? Do I regret refusing to be manipulated anymore? Do I regret choosing my own dignity over their dysfunction? Never. The guest house is gone, but I'm still here. Stronger, wiser, and finally free to build something beautiful. Not a house this time, but a life where I'm valued for who I am, not just what I can provide. My parents drive past my new apartment sometimes. I know because the building faces a main road, and my neighbor mentioned seeing them slow down when they pass. They never stop, never call anymore. The bridges are burned completely, and we're all living with the consequences of choices that were made long before that Tuesday morning. But here's what they don't understand, what they never understood. I didn't demolish that house out of spite or revenge. I demolished it out of love. Love for myself, respect for my own worth, refusal to accept less than I deserved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is destroy what's broken beyond repair and start fresh. Sometimes the only way to build something beautiful is to first clear the ground completely. And sometimes the daughter everyone takes for granted is the one with the power to change everything. I'm Maya, and I'm finally home.